It took me over 5 years to finally attempt probably the most complex thing you can ever do in No Man's Sky, and that is building your own stasis device farm. This is one of the most difficult items to craft in the entire game, taking up hours and dozens of materials just for one, but it's totally worth it because just one of these bad boys sell for over 15 million units. And that's why today I'm going to show you my multi-planet, fully scalable and simplified stasis device farm that runs 24/7 and can make up to billions per day. To make things easier, we're gonna start with just 10 devices, but I'm going to post some links down below if you eventually want to scale all of this up. Now, a big disclaimer for everybody who's starting to play the game right now and is looking at this video: you should attempt this quite late in the game once you kinda got a hold of the mechanics, got some funds going on, and also got some of the end game blueprints. Specifically for the blueprints, the process luckily has been made easier in the past few updates, so now you can head over to the synthesis laboratory on the space anomaly and unlock all of these components right here that you will need to craft your way up to your very own stasis device. In terms of the base parts, this is a really complex automated system, so you will want a lot of the tech modules and maybe even building structures to make all of this look pretty. So stuff like the teleporter, the medium refiner, the standing planter especially for the carbon, and most important of them all, the industrial modules. This includes the mineral, the gas, and the electromagnetic generators, and on top of that I would also add their accessories with the supply depots, power cables, and finally the pipelines. Let's also not forget that you need about 6 of the plants to also craft this, so these 6 right here is what you will need. And I would also add the survey device for your multi-tool. This is going to be a must to find the resource hotspots that we're going to exploit and automate this entire thing. The next process before we begin even searching for the first spot to create this basin is going to be to stock up on materials, which is why I mentioned you're going to need some starting funds, especially for the ferrite dust, carbon, copper or chromatic metal, and pretty much like just the materials needed to build these ones up. I especially recommend stocking up on a ton of metal platings for some of the supply depots. But you got everything up and running, what is the plan? Well, to make a stasis device farm, you will need 3 different types of planets. One lush, one hot, and one cold, preferably in the same system, but it's not mandatory. You can always teleport between them, as that happens quite fast. The reason we're gonna use these 3 planets is because they provide the natural gases and the specific minerals needed to build a stasis device. So this includes the sulfurine and the phosphorus from the hot planet, the radon and dioxide from the cold one, and then finally the nitrogen and the paraffinium from the lush planet. On top of that, one of these should also have cobalt, so we're gonna extract that as well as oxygen, and also use standing planters to get the carbon needed to kind of like multiply these resources. If it sounds complicated, don't worry, I'm going to explain everything as we go on. So let's get started with finding a solar system that kinda does everything for you. It's actually easier than it seems, and I would recommend searching for yellow solar system that have at least 5 or 6 planets, because this increases the chances that 3 of them are going to be the lush, cold, and the hot ones. Once you have identified these 3 planets, hopefully within the same system, make absolutely sure that at least one of them lists cobalt as a secondary resource. For the oxygen, you don't have to worry because, well, all of them will have it anyway. So if you find that, I suggest starting with a planet that also has the cobalt, because it's going to make things easier once you get the hard part out of the way. In my case, the cold planet featured the cobalt, so I started from there, but in your case it could be any of the other 2. Hence why I will start building 4 supply pipelines over here, including the specific mineral and gas of this planet, which are the radon and the dioxide, plus the oxygen and the cobalt, which we do know that they spawn on this planet. Now, as far as finding the hotspots, it can be a bit tricky, but it's not too complicated. If you look at the bottom of your analysis scanner, especially if you have installed the survey device, you will notice that there's 3 additional options to cycle between, and this includes a survey mode for electromagnetic, mineral, and gas hotspots. I think it's pretty self-explanatory how it works. Simply follow the audio and visual cues to your destination. Even if there's no hotspot in range, the directional sound will still give clues where you need to head out into to find the next one. In this case, I always suggest starting with the planet-specific mineral hotspot first, as there can be multiple types of different ones per planet, so you don't want to like get the perfect setup and then, for example, find a copper deposit that is really useless in this case. Once you do find your first deposit, go ahead and mark it with a safe beacon, even color code it to know which one of these locations is which. If you got all of the resources necessary, you should have more than enough to build about 3 or 4 of these safe beacons at the same time. The class of this deposit doesn't really matter. Even if it's a C class, we can still make it work, as that only influences the yield quantity. So even for a low class like this, we're gonna compensate by just building a lot more extractors. After this, you're going to repeat the same process until you find all of the desired hotspots, and I would suggest kind of like circling an area when you find a hotspot so that all of them are evenly spaced out, kind of like trying to build a square or a triangle depending on the planet. In the case of the cobalt planet, that would be 4 extractors for the minerals and 2 gases, plus a 5th one for the electromagnetic power grid, so 5 lines in total. For the rest of the planets, it's going to be actually easier because we only need 2 extractors for their specific gases and minerals, plus a 3rd one for the power grid, so just the cobalt planet is going to be a little bit more difficult to set up. A big tip that I have to make things easier and bring all of your main bases together is to make sure that the hotspots are no more than 1000 units away from each other. Theoretically, you can go for a lot more, but if you aim for just 1000 units, this means you can put a base in the middle of them, ending with several deposits just 500 units from the main primary base in the center, making things very easy from this point on. But now you surveyed all hotspots, it is time to set up a base computer right in the middle of them to kind of have roughly a similar distance to all of the resources spread out. Point at which the next step is to prepare to create the pipelines and the power grids that will carry all of the resources and the electricity needed back to the central base. The reasoning for this is because we don't want to spend too much time collecting, and it's nice to have everything neatly in just one place. But because these deposits can be spaced out quite a bit, chances are that your current base limits won't be able to fully reach them, which is why we're going to extend your base limits. Now, if you're a veteran, you should probably know about this, but you can extend a base limit by simply going to the edge of your current one, which is the place where you will notice that the base building inventory will switch to the non-building inventory. So once you reach this limit while still inside of the ranges of your base, bring up your build menu, activate the build camera mode to detach it from your character, and then just build anything as far away as possible from outside of your existing base limit. It can be anything, but the most straightforward could be a simple wall, and if you continue doing this several times in the direction of your next hotspot, you should be able to reach it and kinda have everything extended to it. Since we don't want to mix things up and kinda like get everything nicely sorted, we're going to create different similar routes for all of the extraction places we have set up. So this includes for all of the minerals and the gases, which will all kind of combine into their own separate lines. With that out of the way, let's talk about specifics and how many gases and minerals you have to extract for these 10 stasis devices. Obviously, since we're using this spreadsheet, you can input any number of stasis devices, and yeah, it will just give you how many of the resources you need to do all of that. But since we're keeping it simple, just 10 stasis devices require 5,000 of the planet-specific gases, so that means 5,000 radon, 5,000 sulfurine, and 5,000 nitrogen. In this case, even for a bad C-class deposit, 2 no more than 3 gas extractors should be plenty enough. In this case, you're seeing me building 8 because eventually I will scale this up to a lot more stasis devices, but like 2 or 3 should be more than enough. When placing the extractors down, I recommend finding the center of the hotspot to maximize the yield. In this case, simply holding up the visor and then using the directional button and paying attention to the percentage percentage changes should give you a rough indication where the center is and where the maximum yield is located. The closer you are to the max cap, the better it is, which means you should also be to the center of that deposit. Once you find that, simply place the first extractor down in the dead center, and from this point on we will want to build all of the subsequent extractors on top of each other. By the way, quick tip, if you want to place them perfectly on top of each other, start with building a wire, and as you press the button to place it, quickly switch to the extractor to place it perfectly in the dead center of the one beneath it, and continue doing this until you build the entire tower. It takes a bit of time to get used to this, but yeah, eventually you should get it right. Now, since the extractors themselves can deposit more than 250 of these respective resources, you will want to also use supply depots to expand the storage capabilities. Again, since we're starting small for just 10 stasis devices, 5 of these supply depots should be enough, minus 1 which will be placed back at our base so we can quickly access and collect the entire yield, but more on that in just a little bit. For the planetary minerals, it's even easier as we only need 500 of dioxide, phosphorus and paraffinium for the 10 stasis devices, which means no more than 1 extractor is plenty enough even for a C-class deposit, and in this case 1 simple supply depot should be enough, but in my case I want to scale this all up, so I will place 3 of them, which is enough even if you build over 60, definitely no more needed than that. Now for the cobalt and the oxygen, it's a similar setup. We're also gonna get these through survey devices, so cobalt is gonna be extracted through a mineral survey. We only need roughly 3,000 of these, maybe even less, because we're also gonna use the oxygen to turn it in a lot more ionized cobalt. So for that, yeah, 1 no more than 2 extractors and about 3 silos is more than enough. For oxygen, I went a bit overboard on the hotspot because I also need it for something else, but honestly 3 extractors and about 5 supply depots should be enough, even less if you manage to find a higher class one. It goes without saying that all of these extractors and their respective supply depots should be connected to one another with supply pipes so that they all have a shared inventory and you don't lose out on any of them. And also make sure you connect the devices between each other with power cables, because we're gonna go to a next step, and that is to also get the power grid going on. All of the 3 bases on the 3 different planets need power to work, including for the industrial machinery. You can totally make do with solar panels and maybe some batteries, but I think it's way cooler and it's way more efficient to just use your very own power grid made out of electromagnetic fields. If you want some rough power estimates which will let you know how many of these generators you need, well, a simple base like this that just does extraction requires roughly 1200 kps from my testing for about 10 stasis devices. So even for a C-class deposit, that should require about 8 of these generators in total. If it's an S-class, for example, you only need about 4 of them, maybe even less, because that can produce twice the power of a C-class. But with that out of the way, let's bring all of these in. You found your deposits, you built these extractors and the power grid on them. It's time to bring it all home. So let's begin with the power grid. We're gonna start from the electromagnetic generators, and of course these all have to be connected to one another using electric wires so they all share the same yield. From this point on, we're gonna get a cable and just go in the direction of our base because we want to bring all of this home. A cable can be extended for very far away, especially if you use a build camera, and can be left open-ended, and then just attach a second cable to the open end and just prolong it from there until you reach the base. In this case, I really enjoy using cuboid room frames because they kinda resemble power towers and they can be used as anchor points, maybe even make them a lot more prettier later down the line, but for now we're gonna keep things simple and just bring this electricity back to our base. Once you do reach the base, I heavily encourage you using a junction box. In this case, we're gonna use a cuboid room to do that. The reason for that is because a cuboid room has snapping points, and if electricity runs through it, it's going to change its color from red to blue, which will indicate if power is running through your base, so that is quite nice. In the case of the extractors, it's pretty much the same, except we won't just bring back electric wires to the junction box, but also supply pipelines. The reason for that is because we both need these to carry the yield from the extraction location back to our base, and because we also need to feed power to them by connecting them to the junction box we have there at the center. That is why I recommend having all of these extractors connected to their respective supply depots, and then kinda using that supply pipe to bring it as far away as possible in the direction of your base using the build camera. This can also be left open-ended, so you can connect a second supply pipe to it and then just continue from there. Once you have reached back at the base with the supply pipes, you will want to connect this to a final supply depot. The reason for that is because this is going to let you interact with the entire grid and see exactly how much all of the extractors will produce for that specific line, so that you don't have to travel back at the hotspot. This is going to let you see all of this regardless of how far spaced between one another these supply depots and extractors are, as long as they are connected with the same line. I would also suggest color coding them again to know exactly which one of these supply depots provide which mineral or which gas, and once you're done with that, also make sure that you have connected all of the electrical wiring back at the junction box, which should power all of your lines now and have everything all sorted and running. Now, from this point on, there's just two more phases left. We kind of handled the specific minerals and the specific gases. We just need the biodomes for the plants and the carbon from the standing planters. Starting with the standing planters, since we do need a lot of condensed carbon, these provide a lot of carbon, so it's easy to set up quite a lot of these in your base if you have the room for them. You don't need more than 1500 carbon for the 10 stasis devices, so about 20 standing planters should be more than enough, as the yield can vary quite a bit between about 60 all the way up to 100. For the biodomes, it's even easier. These are also going to hold your plants, and they will grow regardless of the environment you set these biodomes in. In the case of the 10 stasis device farm, I calculated that I would need about 15 and a bit of biodomes, so I just set up 16 of these in total, and this is the breakdown for each of the plant that I've planted inside of them. So for the star bulb, selenium, and frost crystals, I've planted 50 of each of these respective plants. For gamma weed, I've planted 55, 20 for the Phaceum flowers, and 10 for the cactus plants. And this should give you all the 1000 plants needed per day for those 10 stasis devices. Obviously, as you've noticed, my biodomes are kind of phased into one another to save some space, and that's not gonna be a problem because, yeah, collecting all of the items inside is just one button away, as there's a mass collector in the middle of all of these biodomes that you can just press to collect all of the resources inside, so that comes in quite handy. And once all of this is up and running, once all of the resources are produced and then collect, the final point is to just refine it all. Specifically, we're gonna refine that cobalt and the carbon, also using the oxygen to kind of multiply its yield into the condensed carbon and the ionized cobalt. So because my cold planet already had these two sorted out, I did the final refinements over there after already collecting everything from the previous two planets. In this case, I needed about 5 refiners, so to build 5 of them, because there's a 3 limit restriction, you can simply use the wire glitch method to kind of bypass all of that. So simply pick a medium refiner, then switch pressing Q to the electric wire, and as you press the button to place the wire down, quickly switch to the refiner, and this is going to let you place another one on top of the 3 ones in the same area. In this case, 3 of them I'm keeping to refine oxygen and carbon into condensed carbon, and the remaining 2 to refine cobalt plus oxygen into ionized cobalt. Again, you're kind of more than doubling the yield you had originally if you also use oxygen in the mix, so you get all the thousands needed and then some with just this setup. Once that is all sorted, the only thing remaining is to combine all of these basic mats into the remaining components like the living glass, circuit boards, superconductors, and all of the rest that eventually will result into the 10 stasis devices for these 150 plus million units that you don't have to worry about from this point on, as it's all fully automatic. And if you eventually want to build up to, for example, a billion plus a day, you can always just go ahead and build more extractors, more planters, more biodomes, and just have the yield increase more and more until you make however much you want. Again, all of the resources down below. Also a big thanks to my friend Zane's World for his comprehensive mega guide that, yeah, this video was pretty much inspired from, as well as the spreadsheet creators linked in the description down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time.